Hi, my name is Bart Harmsen. I'm the Pantera Jaguar Fellow here, working for the University of Belize, the Environmental Research Institute. I've been here in Belize since 2003 when I started my Ph.D. And currently we are here in the Central Belize Corridor, which is the heart of the where everything is happening concerning Jaguars in Belize. The Central Belize Corridor connects the northern Jaguar populations with the southern Jaguar population, and everywhere around the Jaguar range is where we're trying to do that. Making sure that Jaguars remain connected, where populations of Jaguars are there, and for that we need to know where they are exactly. And since Jaguars are very elusive animals and you hardly ever see them yourself, we need help, and for that we need camera traps. And that's what today is all about, because we need to know where we can find Jaguars, and especially where different individual Jaguars are. Jaguars are individually recognizable, and that is very good because it means that we can count them, we can count individuals, and we can actually see where different animals are going, as long as we got a very good distributed network of cameras around. And that is at the moment why we have the Eyes on the Wild campaign, because we need camera traps, and everybody around within Pantera, from jaguars here to tigers in Asia to leopards and lions in Africa to snow leopards high up in the Himalayas, we all need these. And it's one standard little box, but it's the way how we can actually save cats around the world. And so this is, and that is one thing that we actually need right now to get your help with, and that's why I'm here to answer your questions about Jaguars and how we're actually doing this right now. And I got a question here from Danielle G. It says, "Hi Bart, how many Jaguars live in Belize?" Now that is the million-dollar question. And I get it asked a lot. That's why we need lots of these, but if I have to give you a very rough estimate, it would be between 800 and 1400, something like that. But that is almost like a range that is from 800 to, that would be doubling it. So we need to know it a little bit more precise, and we need to know actually what are their strongholds and where are the weak spots in the whole connection of Jaguars. And so that is what we're working on right now. And 800 to 1400 is actually a very large number. It actually means that Belize is a very good country for Jaguars, and the reason is because we still have a lot of it around, which is a lot of forest. And that's one of the very good things about Belize. It's a Jaguar stronghold. 60% of the country is still forested. It's rapidly decreasing. There's a lot of need for economic activity. The population here is increasing a lot, and so that means we can expect this number to go down very rapidly. Then I got a question here from Karen. Does the camera flash bother the Jaguars? Equally a question that's being asked. You can see here the Pantera camera traps that we use. They have a flash on it, and when the Jaguar walks by, he gets triggered, and there's a flash coming out of it. We had Jaguars mating in front of our cameras, actually triggering up to 50 to 60 pictures within a very short space of time. And so we know that it doesn't bother them. Usually they just walk by, and that's just it. Sometimes they're curious and they walk up to the camera, but we never seen any kind of thing of fear or anything like that. So that's a good thing. Our cameras are not bothering them, and we can nicely monitor them. And that's what we keep doing. And sometimes it's a country where you can see it's slightly cloudy. There's a lot of thunderstorms out here, and so flashes are frequently around here anyway. And so, no, a flash doesn't bother them in any kind of way. And we equally, what we would expect, if they would be fearful, we would see that individuals would start disappearing away from our camera trap spots, and we've never noticed that. They just keep being around, and they just keep moving around around our camera traps. We have actually very good what we call capture rates when we capture them on our cameras. So we don't actually capture them. That's a good thing about it as well. We know a lot about them without actually bothering them, because they can just freely walk around and we're just monitoring them just with these cameras. Okay, and I got another question here, and it's from Carolina. Asked, what are the criteria that you follow to set up a camera in one specific place? What we use as criteria at the moment is actually, what we don't want is that we miss cats. So we want to have them distributed around the landscape so that we can actually not have a Jaguar living in between our cameras, that we actually, all of them have a chance that they can get captured. So for that, at the moment, we're using a criteria of roughly 1 to 2 kilometers, and every different country has different criteria depending on the home range. And the home range is just the area where the Jaguar walks. How much space do they need? If you have smaller home ranges, we would put the cameras closer together. If you got larger home ranges, we can get away with spacing them out further apart. And we prefer to put them on little trails that they can walk on. So we got their good walkways that we cover, and those are the places where we actually can see them a lot, and that it's actually good on that. All right, I got a next question here from John Portman. What type of environment does the Jaguar prefer? It's actually places where people are not. That's actually the way. They're kind of shy and they prefer to stay away from people. And so an environment like this would be pretty good. It's a little bit open. They like close forests if they can. They like water. They definitely like water. They're one of the cats that actually is not afraid of water. They swim very well. And so that would be, as long as there's water, as long as there's wilderness, especially where there's food around and prey, and they're being left alone, then Jaguars do pretty well. And I got here a question from Key Fabrio. In which district do you find the most Jaguar activity? And that would be referring to here in Belize. Yeah, that's a very difficult one. Most districts here are all pretty good. I would say that perhaps the most developed areas here in Belize would be the north, but the north still has Jaguars. That would be the Corazon district. There's still Jaguars there, but if you would look at their real strongholds, it would probably be Stan Creek and Toledo, and probably also in Orange Walk, especially around the Rio Bravo area. And I'm now actually mentioning almost all the districts here in Belize, so we're actually getting pretty far. But those are the real strongholds, because you got the Rio Bravo area in the north, and you got the Cayo and Stan Creek district with Toledo that are the Maya Mountain areas. Okay, I got a question here from Susie Shepherd. Have you ever seen a Jaguar face to face in the wild? Yes, I have. I've seen them around 30 times, and I've seen them, well, as close as I can be to this camera, which is about, I don't know, I would say 10 feet away from me or something like that. And it was a marvelous experience. It's one of the big things that I actually still remember as the main things. I've seen them several times. I've bumped into males and females together, and I feel a privileged person. And here a question from Annabelle Cruz. What do Jaguars prey on in Belize? Actually, you would think such a big, powerful animal that they would eat really big animals mainly, but 50% of their diet is actually armadillos, which is an animal about this big. And that is basically, if you would call it in Belizean terms, that would be their rice and beans. If you would then actually look at what in Belizean terms, what would be the chicken, that would be the wild pigs like the peccaries, the white-lipped peccaries and the collared peccaries. And those are the ones that we have to make sure that remain protected. But they mainly eat armadillos as their staple diet. And you frequently, when you go out in the wild, you actually see that eaten out shells of armadillo sometimes lying around. Now, the one thing that I also want to say, of course, if you like to help us get more camera traps in the wild, you can help with a donation right now in Facebook. It's right there. You can click on there right now, and any donation will help. One of these camera traps costs $150 US, but any donation will do it. These are actually very good and reliable cameras, and we're really happy with it. I've been working with camera traps for a very, very long time, all kinds of types, commercial types, but I'm not saying this because this is a Pantera camera, but they did a sterling job on this, because I wouldn't want any other types that are around there. So please donate and help us do this for all around the world. I got a question here from Ivan Deutsch. What is the most pressing threat to jaguars in Central America? I would say habitat destruction. If you look throughout the range, Jaguar's range, it is actually that economic increases of land needed for agriculture, for cattle ranching, is increasing very dramatically, and that means that there is more and more land being cleared for human consumption needs of meat consumption, agricultural needs, and that will be the main threat. And one of the things with cattle industry is equally that jaguars then, because of the prey being removed, are then looking for alternative prey, and it means they start preying on cattle, and it means that they then get killed in retaliation by farmers. And that's always the thing that actually then causes a cycle in which they will go extinct in areas, and that has happened in many parts already. Alright, I got a question from Joyce Chang. How serious is the deforestation trend in Belize? At the moment, it is actually, deforestation is a serious threat. It's happening all over the place, but it's not as high as in many of our surrounding countries. I would always say, and this is me being in Belize, that Belize can be very proud of that. It's still one of those jewels in the region that has a lot of forest. It's a little jewel surrounded by areas that are getting more and more patchy, and Belize is becoming a real stronghold in the region for jaguars. But deforestation is actually a big threat for jaguars. So that is one of the things that is there. And here I got a follow-up question from Susie. What do the jaguars typically do when you see them that close? Alright, now the one thing that they do is that they look at you, they try to figure out what you are, and then they actually just run off. Usually what it is that they just stand there. They're curious. They're a cat, so they're curious. They just stand there and then they walk away. If you would actually run away yourself, you're almost like a mouse going after a fur ball. So it means that they would actually follow you. They would actually try to figure out what you are. But you can actually always get rid of a jaguar by just making a step forward, kind of making a noise, and they'll just run off. And but when you got the chance to look at them, just enjoy the moment. I actually think the jaguars are not a threat at all, and I've seen them many times. I'm always unarmed, and that's one of the things where I can actually tell you that jaguars are not threatening at all. I got here another question, and it's from Francis Canto Jr. And what is the status of the jaguar population in Belize? Declining, stable, or increasing? That is equally the million-dollar question. In some parts of Belize, which are actually the best protected areas, like Coxcomb, like the Rio Bravo, we can honestly say that the populations there are relatively stable. They are doing okay there, but the areas around their strongholds are being degraded quite heavily, and they're definitely declining there. It's not that we can say that there's areas where they're actually going up. Sometimes it can be perceived like that if areas are cleared and they're suddenly moving in the human-dominated landscape, because then we see them a lot more. Alright, I got another question from Hassan Arif Rahman. And what are the key research activities Pantera is conducting on the ground. Now, one of the things that it is, it's actually looking at where are jaguars, where are tigers, where are lions, where are leopards, where are snow leopards. Finding out what are the key areas where we actually have to make sure that protection happens. Sometimes it's just small little connection areas because of genetic exchange that's necessary. And those sort of things we need to find out. And that's where we do the monitoring. Equally, we have to make sure that law enforcement, that they don't get killed and that people don't kill them in retaliation. Basically making sure that people can live next to jaguars and that the last wild places remain protected. I got another question from Annabelle, and that says, do other big carnivores share the home range with jaguars? Yes, the jaguars share their home ranges with pumas. And pumas are another big cat. Jaguars are definitely bigger. So the jaguar would be more of the top predator, and sometimes you can see that in certain parts pumas actually get a little bit marginalized. And in certain areas pumas are struggling more than jaguars. You can see that, for example, here in Belize, where jaguars' main prey is armadillo. The main prey for pumas is actually an animal called a paca. And pacas are very much liked by people. And so there's higher competition between pumas and people, and that's where they're struggling. Pumas are struggling sometimes a little bit more than jaguars. And so it's a high interplay of these big carnivores that are there. If you go further down south, of course, there's another carnivore which is the Andean bear, but actually there is very little interaction between the two of them, and Andean bears are equally getting very endangered. So we always have to look at all the interactions that are happening down there in that respect. I got another question here from Mickey McBride, and it says, is there a good chance the jaguar will re-inhabit the United States? That is a tough one. That is a real tough one, and it's one of the things where there needs to be unimpeded movement into the United States. The more it's made difficult for a jaguar to cross the United States-Mexican border, the more difficult it will be for a jaguar to move in there. Now, the one thing that we know is that it's mainly male animals that are moving into the United States, and that's because males are the more mobile of the two sexes. Females are always a little bit more cautious. They set up their range closest to where their moms, where they were born, and it's the males that are the moving front ahead. So what you need is an unimpeded, small population that can move from the closest population to the north, which is in the Sonora Desert, and that population needs females who can recolonize areas between the border of the United States and the closest Mexican population in the Sonora. I got here a question from Maximiliano Cal. What concerns and solutions are there to coyotes being present within the home ranges of jaguars? This concerns coyotes actually coming into Belize more and more. When I first started working here in Belize, there were no coyotes here, and more you get coyotes coming into the country. And that can actually be a big problem. Farmers are actually complaining now that sometimes coyotes are more of a problem than jaguars. Now, the one thing is that a jaguar is a much more powerful animal than a coyote, and actually it could be that very soon we might have farmers saying we prefer to have jaguars around because they keep the coyotes away. Coyotes are incredibly smart, they're group living, and so how those dynamics will in the end come out, we'll have to see, but for the moment it is more that jaguars will keep coyotes under control, and we'll have to see what the competition of coyotes will be with jaguars. Only time will tell. Those dynamics are very complex. Becky Wooldridge asked, what has been your most memorable jaguar sighting? I got several. One of the ones was a very close encounter that I had with a jaguar. It was my very first one, and that was a very close one. But I definitely have to say that one of the ones was a jaguar encounter that I had with a very particular student from the UK who walked with me at the time. Was with one of the animals that we know. It was Ben, the Jaguar that we've been tracking for a long time, and later on the cameras we actually found that we saw him. We walked past the camera trap and we saw him with another, with a female, which the female we call F11.9, and it was very good to be able to see a Jaguar that we've known so long from camera traps, and that we actually sort of know which individual we saw. So that was very cool. I think I equally like to say again, if you would like to help us with getting camera traps so that we can monitor all these cats that we know, please donate. Any amount is very helpful, so that we can buy more of these camera traps. And please do. They're fantastic camera traps. They're very cheap for their prices compared to commercial camera traps. So it would be really good and helpful that we can get more of these everywhere around the world for our programs in Jaguar range, snow leopard range, lion range, leopard range, tiger range, everywhere around. So please do make sure that you help us with this, because the more we can get all these cameras around every tree that is around the country, the better it is for everything. And now I want to know, are there any more questions for us here before we wrap up? And then we can actually make sure that we keep doing the good work. I got a question here from Rafael Castillo. What can be done at the local level in Belize to address Jaguar-human conflict caused by deforestation due to agricultural expansion? One thing that we can do is make sure that farms are managed in a better way, so that Jaguars are actually not having to, that they actually know that they're going on a farm, that they actually find out sort of like, this is not the place where I should be, so that they walk in, that there's suddenly lights popping up, that there is open spaces that they have to cross which they don't like, that there's proper fencing, like electric fencing. There's even many people who try donkeys, because believe it or not, donkeys are very good guard animals. They make a lot of noise, they're not afraid, they go towards predators when they smell them, where cattle would be more kind of freaked out and start scattering. And so that would be one of the ways how we do it, and we're trying to investigate more and more methods here, and we got experts in the country who are working on that. Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for helping us out, for asking all these excellent questions, and I would really like to ask you, please help us with getting more of these cameras for all around cats range, both Jaguars, pumas, lions, leopards, tigers, everything. Snow leopards, don't forget snow leopards. Alright, I think that was it. Oh, I got another question, and it's from Michael Willett. Do you have any tips for camera trapping? Do you use bait or pheromones, etc.? We don't use it, and one of the reasons is our bait is basically the small little trail that we have. Trails are very good for Jaguars to walk on, and we want to actually see how they naturally behave. So if you start luring them in, you kind of change their behavior a little bit, and so we prefer not to do it. I know that in other countries they do use it, but it's actually in places where they have trouble getting Jaguars on camera, so they get more sort of like, look, anything that helps that can make them visible is good. We're lucky enough here in Belize that we don't need that. Jaguars are still prolific enough, and so that is a really good thing. One of the things we equally want to make sure that you know, please follow Dr. Rabinovich and Dr. Howard Quigley on their journey throughout the Jaguars range, all the way from Mexico all the way down. They're walking the different paths of the Jaguar, which is actually the corridor network that's being created and promoted by Pantera with partners here on the ground. Here it's with the ERI at UB, and with the forest department, where we're trying to work on all the connections here in Belize, but in every other country they're trying to make these connected networks. and Dr. Rabinowitz and Dr. Quigley are at the moment walking that corridor network to promote the Jaguars' journey throughout Latin America. And so that is equally something where we're all trying to make sure that we promote Jaguars, how we can save them by having a connective network and by having good protected areas. And I want to equally say here about Belize. Belize is doing an excellent job at that. And Belize is this little jewel in the Jaguars range where we still have a lot of Jaguars, and we're trying to keep it that way. And so for that, equally we need to thank all of our partners like Belize Audubon Society that we work with in the Coxcomb, Yache Conservation Trust in the south, Tide up north, CSFI in the north in Corazol, Rio Bravo with PFB. All of them are doing excellent work, and I'm sorry if I forget people. Okay, well, I think that was from me from the field. I'll give you one last look from the Central Belize corridor right here. And that was it from me. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll join us again one day here again, or one of my colleagues in other countries. Thank you very much.